Hello and welcome back to another episode of Senior Spot. My name is Jen Quinn and I'm so pleased today to have the guest Jon Younger, who is a part of Assisted Living Locators, which is a very needed service that we have as our aging population continues to grow and just increase day after day. And people want to know where it is that would be the best, most suitable place for them to live out the best years of their life. So Jon, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jen. Appreciate being here.
Well, I am delighted to be able to have the audience learn a little bit about your company. You're the owner of Assisted Living Locators, which seems very self-explanatory if you were to break down all the words, but I want to hear it from you. What do you do? What is it that is your specialty?
Well, the specialty is I help seniors and their families find the healthiest, safest, most comfortable environment to live in when it's time to look at assisted living or memory care.
Excellent.
It's a very emotional time when it's time to go looking for assisted living, and I help the families navigate through that the whole daunting, overwhelming task of finding that specific place.
Well, that and all the emotions that come along with it, like you mentioned, because there's a variety of emotions. People are sad, people are upset, some people are elated. So you really have to kind of regulate, a lot more than just showing them places. You're really helping them to get used to the idea of a big change in their life.
Right. I get to know the family. I get to know the senior. I get to know the different communities that are out there to choose from. Ask the main questions of, what location do you want to live in? Do you want to be in Westford? Do you want to be in New Hampshire? Do you want to be down the Cape? Yeah. What does your budget look like? Because there is an expense that goes along with moving into these assisted living places. And what are the medical needs? Because you really need to match, really need to match the senior with the right environment so that they'll thrive and be happy.
Right. And you probably want to help people figure out a solution or a choice that's going to be more long-term, because certainly going through something like this that's life-changing, going through it frequently is something that people want to avoid.
Exactly. We really want to be able to narrow into the one perfect place and be able to stay there. And the majority of the communities that are out there enable you to do that. And most seniors thrive in these environments and can live out the rest of their lives in this environment as well. The worst thing you can do is get into a place that doesn't work out, and then you have to move.
Right.
And then maybe you have to move again. Yeah. And that's what I'm an expert in. That's what I do. I help the folks analyze the different places. I go with them on the tours, ask the questions, because there are a lot of questions that folks don't know how to answer, and that's because they don't know what they don't know.
Sure, absolutely. And you know what? I'm jotting that down because I want to find out from you what are some of the really important questions to ask, not just the obvious ones of activities and things, but what are the really important questions. But before we get into that, I would really like to know how did you come to get into this field? What drew you to to having a passion for doing this as your profession? Right.
Well, thanks for that. It's kind of it's a long winding road, but the short story is roughly 3 or 4 years ago, my mother-in-law was in an assisted living, thriving, doing well, and then she started to go a little bit downhill. Her needs changed. And what I was observing at this time, because there's a family members, very extended family, and things were going well at the assisted living. However, when her needs started changing, there wasn't a lot of communication among the family members, among the communities. The questions, nobody knew the right questions to ask. Even some of the communities they didn't know her well enough to ask the right questions. The family didn't understand that there were other choices out there, and they didn't understand what questions to ask either. So it became difficult, and she's thriving today, alive and wonderful.
Excellent.
She's in a different phase of her journey. But before that, this was her third move. So going back to your point earlier, she did end up moving a couple of times because of mainly miscommunications, expectations that were thought were going to be made on both ends, community and the family, that weren't met because they were never addressed.
Sure. And we all know that, different communities are going to be offering, something that might appeal to you, but might not appeal to me. So I mean, it's not a one size fits all, because as human beings, we're certainly not all the same, cut from the same cloth.
Right.
So it was your own personal experience
It's
with
my
it.
personal experience. I was not the caregiver, her daughters were, but I was able to observe the whole process and realizing that the process is very confusing and overwhelming. I figured that, I was thinking there has to be a way, there must be some way of putting a liaison in between the family and the community that can help guide and navigate both the community, because that's important too, and the family to the right conclusion.
Well, and I like that it's unbiased too, because with families, let's just say that it's challenging and people have different opinions, and you're unbiased.
Right.
You're just looking out for the best interest of the person.
Right.
And so you're not gonna be pitted one child against another. You're really just being the advocate for what's going to be the best fit. So I assume that going through this experience with your mother-in-law, you didn't just decide the next day, well, I'm just going to, order up some shirts that say Assisted Living Locator. So how did you get from that point to where you are now?
Well, I came across this franchise, Assisted Living Locators, because I was looking at franchise opportunities, what might be out there, because I was looking to take my life in a different direction.
Sure, I can understand that.
Yeah. And I came across Assisted Living Locators. And they are a franchise based in Phoenix, about 15 years old. Today have, I want to say, roughly 60 owners, meaning probably 50 actual franchises, all across the country. And I liked their model and what they were doing. It really fit what I was looking to do, was to be that person who can help the families and help the communities, matchmaking seniors.
And I would imagine that there was training involved, and that you just instinctively knew from your own experience what types of questions would be important to ask. But I'm sure that there's a whole layer of expertise in the background and the research behind.
Right.
Anybody can say, I'm pretty good at asking questions. I'm going to go with my friend to go check a place out. But I'm assuming that the infrastructure and support from Assisted Living Locators really just broadened, how you could become an expert in that area.
Right. So you do the training, and the infrastructure with them is terrific. I also went off and became a certified senior advisor and a certified dementia practitioner. So it's not just one and done. It's a continuous education. Yep. I'm always, taking different credits and learning more about seniors and different aspects of their lives. And they, as to your point, they do offer a great infrastructure. I don't have to worry about creating logos. I don't have to worry about creating websites. I don't have to worry about a customer management tool, because it's all there. And they actually help me input that information. I'll send them information.
So you can really concentrate on
focus on the families.
What you got into it originally for to begin with. So, I mean, in coming across, you at different things, and we go to a lot of the same events because we're both working towards making seniors' lives, the best life possible. But I would love to hear, some of your some of your success stories, because I know you have them.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Because you're always smiling. I know that there's some good things going on.
Yeah, no, it's been terrific. It's been a little over a year, and been having a really good time helping out the seniors and their families. A great story is a move-in that I made maybe 6 months ago. A social worker at a rehab gave me a call and said, "Hey, I have a patient here who is looking who needs to get out of the rehab and looking for dementia-specific care." And so I went into the rehab, sat in on the discharge meeting, met the family, daughter, 2 brothers, father. They were both, the father and mother and father were living together in a apartment, but he could no longer care for his wife. They're both, 85-ish. And so I set about understanding what they needed, what they were looking for. And the tricky part of it was the husband wanted to stay with the wife. So that adds a whole different dimension to where I'm going to be looking.
Sure.
So I'm looking for places that have a dementia-specific care and independent living at the same time. because the thought was mother would live in the dementia care section, and father could live in independent living and come and go as he
great,
pleased.
right.
I did end up helping them find a great place. They're both thriving. I go visit them every couple of weeks just to see how they're doing, because that's
Sure.
also I follow up.
Oh, right.
You know, it's been 6 months, but I'll go in and see how they're doing, and he's doing great. He has friends come over, and they go off and do stuff, and he'll go up and visit with his wife, bring her down to dinner. They'll have dinner together.
That's great,
And
because that's not
it's,
easy. I mean, that's two very, very different levels
Very
of
different,
care.
right?
So not all places are going to have that.
Right.
You know, so that must have been challenging.
It was challenging, but the reward is, the daughter pulled me aside and said, "Geez, this is great, John. We never would have known about this place without you."
That's great.
And
what a
that's,
good feeling.
That's, you know,
yeah.
goosebumps. That's my reward.
Absolutely.
Is to be able to match the folks up with the greatest place.
So, you know, how does somebody, you know, come across you? You know, I mean, I know that, you know, you could just look up, you know, something online and, you know, first, how would somebody start up? I guess it's two questions. How would somebody start up their services with you? You know, what's required? What do you do? How do you get the ball rolling?
Well, it's I get referrals from many different sources. You know, short-term rehab workers, the internet, word of mouth.
Or just friends with parents or
Right.
people with sisters or brothers that
and
need
the
help.
tree, you know, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So I'd get the phone call. Excuse me. I'll get the phone call, and we'll do a interview over the phone and in person, either or, whichever is most convenient. And they don't have to sign any paperwork. There's no commitments. The only I kind of like it's being a real estate broker.
Okay.
So once they start working with me, the process is finding the people places, taking them on the tours, and I don't charge any money.
Okay.
This is a free service to the family. And the reason why I can make it a free service is because I work out a fee agreement with the community.
Okay.
So that's the real estate broker kind of thing.
Got it. All right. Because I was wondering how that all worked. If
Yeah.
it, you know, because different situations, different arrangements.
Yeah.
So then the actual assisted living would say, you know, John, you brought this great couple to us. This is, you know, how we're gonna, you know, this is how we're gonna make this arrangement. Okay.
Right, right. So that way, that's a free service. The family doesn't have to worry about more, you know, another budget piece.
That's huge because
which
I
is
mean,
big,
you're looking at usually, you know, putting down a large sum of money,
Mm-hmm.
which is really scary for most people. But then to know that that's not a cost that they would, you know, it doesn't prohibit somebody from using a specialist. I guess that's
Right.
what's really nice is
Right.
that they're going to be able to use your services. And you know, it might be one tour, it might be 25 tours. You never know, right?
It is. You know, I recommend 2 or 3, and that's it.
Right. Okay.
I have had the folks who I took on 15 different tours, but that's what they wanted to do, and whatever the family's in charge.
Sure.
You know, whatever they want to do, I'll do with my advice to them. You know, I have
Right.
a family right now that is verging on that 6th or 7th visit, so it gets really confusing.
Sure.
Not for me, because you know I'm taking them to places I've already been and I already understand.
But it must start to get blurry. I
It's
mean,
very
just
blurry.
everything starts to look and sound the same, and you get confused, and it's
Right.
So, you know, I'm really glad that you made that point about the fact that the families are not paying a fee to have
Right.
your expertise and your services. So, you know, that right there is a big differentiator, you know, for you, I
Mm-hmm.
think. But also, you know, how are you different from just somebody, you know, a daughter or a son saying, you know what, we don't need to spend the time, because it's not money for
Right.
them, but we don't need to spend the time making these arrangements. I'm just going to look it up online. I'm just going to go and do this research online. So what makes it a benefit of going with someone like yourself versus, you know, just looking all the information
Right.
online that's available?
Well, exactly. But the benefit to utilizing my services is the information that you see online is overwhelming. You get bombarded. You push this button and something else comes up talking about this specific place. You push another button and something else comes up. And what they also don't understand sometimes is if you push a button and it takes you to a specific community, that community. It's not on their community, but there's other services that come up, and you have to start filling out questionnaires. And when you start filling out questionnaires, then you start getting phone calls.
Yes.
And internet's wonderful. It's an okay place to kind of start. However, you can get swept into the pictures.
Sure.
You can get overwhelmed by the amount of information. If you go Google assisted living, there's going to be 7 or 8 paid for advertising places.
Right.
So you're not getting the real picture online. By using me, I've already been to most of those places, and after I've done a nice in-depth assessment and interview with the family, I'm going to know 2 or 3 places to go immediately.
Right.
And I would make those recommendations and take them along.
That's a huge time saver. So, you know, people might think that they're saving time by going online and doing the research themselves, when really they're spending more time than they probably need to. If you already look at somebody, know what their likes, what their dislikes are, and all of those things, and you're balancing and you're saying what locations you want to be in. Is it important for them to have a memory unit there at the same facility that possibly they could transition to? So you've kind of already gone through the checklist, or you have the checklist in your head, and that's how you're able to kind of pull up.
On the internet, you're not going to know if there's a men's club. On the internet, you're not going to know what the cost structure is.
Very true.
You know, on the internet, you're not going to know. You'll see the stock photos, but you're not going to understand the care levels. You're not going to know if the people who are there are happy, or unhappy, or if is there a turnover in their caregivers.
Absolutely.
You know, these are things that I know.
Right, and the administration, because you could say, you know, I've known this administrator has been here for 15 years. Well, that speaks volumes if someone's been there 15 years. Where, as opposed to a place where you've been in business for, you said, a little over a year, right? And if there's been 2 or 3 people in a year, you know, that's a different type of, you know, a different type of setup, perhaps. So you were talking about New Hampshire and Westford and different places. So can you tell us a little bit about the locations, you know, that, or the area, or just, you know, where is it that you're able to go, and what you're able to, you know, expose to people? Sure.
I concentrate in Essex County, I concentrate in Middlesex County, and in southern New Hampshire.
Okay.
I have done some placing down in the Suffolk, northern Boston, west of Boston places. That's mainly if somebody gives me a call.
Sure.
So where I focus is Essex County, Middlesex County, and New Hampshire. However, if I get a phone call from someplace else, I'm able to help them either by doing it, finding out myself, or there are other folks, other resources that I would refer them to.
Point them in the direction of, I mean, because you want, obviously, you know, by a phone call, if I were able to call you up and describe my aunt and say, this is what she's looking for, this are the needs, this is what we see long term, this is what her goals are, and this is the area that we want to, you know, have her be living in, you're able to say, as I'm sure your wheels just might start turning as every single detail that's offered to you, you know. So you want to be able to have a broad base of where you go, but at the same time, you want to know intimately the places, because otherwise, you know.
So on a couple of occasions, I have referred to other resources. Cape Cod, for instance, I don't go to Cape Cod unless I'm going to go to the beach.
Wait, I was going to say, you don't want a good reason to go down. I think,
an excuse to go.
I think I need to go on a business trip down to Cape Cod during the summer, and then I'm going to be able to find out about these places.
Exactly.
That's not too shabby.
No, it's not, but if I'm not marketing down there, if I'm not living down there, I don't understand the level of availability in places down there that I have the expertise up here.
Sure.
So it's not fair for the family for me to say, okay, I know this place, but I really don't because I haven't been there. So then I'll use other resources to refer them on to those
Well, and I know that the relationship that you've developed amongst, you know, other people that are in the sort of the senior care, the senior care, I guess, field, really, including myself, is that you get to know people. And what's better than being able to say, you know, for me, you know, I know a gentleman that is this is what he does, and I can certainly go and recommend a few places, but I don't know them inside and out.
Right.
You know, so even having colleagues that are in the business, in the senior care business like myself, it's what's better than having a first name and a cell phone or an email to directly contact somebody. It makes a big difference.
And also the other way around for me, if I'm sitting with a family and we're talking about assisted living, which is my expertise, but they want to stay home, which is also a great option, I don't want to get up from the table and say, sorry, I can't help you.
Right, right.
You know, my goal is to help the family.
Yeah,
and the
we're all in
senior.
this together.
Absolutely,
Someone's going to get to be where they need to be.
Yep.
That's what I love about, you know, meeting people like yourself, because you can tell you're in it for all the right reasons,
Right.
and especially just coming from the story of why you initially got interested in it.
Right.
You know, and in that story about your mother-in-law and talking about the communication, I think that's a big piece of it. And I'd love to kind of backtrack to find out from you what the questions, what are the questions that you might think to ask that someone might not, just coming off the street.
Right.
But also, what do you think are the most critical questions that could and should be asked when people are seriously contemplating
Sure.
a major move?
Sure. I think one of the most critical questions is, what is your fall procedure? If somebody meaning somebody's falling down.
Okay. You want to
Because-
clarify, not like that, you know, do you go out and look at the leaves?
Right,
You
not the
literally-
season, but the
Yeah.
falling down, because that is a very common occurrence
Okay.
as folks age.
Sure is.
And people fall down at home, they fall down going to the grocery store. They can still fall down in assisted living. There's not going to be someone there to hold them up the whole time. So one of the most critical questions is, if your family member is a fall risk, what do you do? What's your process? Do you have a couple nurses come in and pick them up and take care of them and dress their wounds or do an exam? Or do you immediately call 911 and send them off to the hospital?
Interesting.
Do you call the family? Do you have the ability to take care of the folks at the community, or do you have to send them out to the hospital?
That's a question I never, ever would have fathomed would be, and it's probably one of the most important questions you could ask, because two major reasons why people end up in the ER are falls and, you know, not adhering to their medications.
Right.
So amazing. The two things that I know that people go to the emergency room for more often than anything else, you know, is a question I never would have thought to ask. I mean, that's brilliant.
Right. Oh, thank you.
It is. It's great. I mean, that's so important.
And what that segues into is other things. So you've got the fall, so that's going to help you determine how safe is my loved one going to be. How's the staff ratio? You know, if there's enough staff to be able to attend to your loved one who's fallen or any other issue, while they have more staff that can attend to some of the other folks that are there too.
Interesting.
So staff ratios are always important.
Sure, but it's interesting because you can ask the staff ratios. You can ask, you know, what CNAs to residents, or, you know, do you have an overnight nurse? Do you have someone that's always on the property?
Right.
You know, I never would have thought that that's a really unique way of figuring out the ratio, because it's not just numbers, it's actually putting those numbers
Right.
into practice of why it's important. Why do we ask about ratios? We
Right.
ask about them for that exact reason. Huh. Okay. So that's a great question. So throw out another one.
Another question. Well, I've got to tell my favorite question.
Okay.
My favorite question, this stems from my experience with my mother-in-law. They don't live in Westridge, so
Okay.
they probably won't see this. That's okay. My favorite questions, I always ask this question too, is, do you folks provide paper products? Toilet paper, paper towels, Kleenex.
Well, as long as it's 2-ply, hopefully. No, I'm just kidding.
That's
But
that's why I
know
asked.
people are very particular.
Yeah.
I'm very particular about
Yeah.
paper products. So.
And people are like thrown back by that, but then as we get talking to it, they understand. I never would have asked that question, and that's an
Never.
important question. The answer is, sometimes we don't. I mean, this is an apartment.
Yep.
This is
That's
this
right.
is your senior's home.
Yep. So there's
So
an expectation for some level of independence,
Yeah.
whether it be the person or whether it be a family member, to supply those things.
Right. So
Wow.
in some cases, I mean, and the question stems because I'm paying quite a bit of money
Right.
to live in this apartment.
And I want the toilet
and I
paper
want
that comes
my
along.
Charmin or my 2-ply. I want,
Exactly.
and like, well, this isn't like an apartment. If you want that, then you have to go and get it yourself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and it's, you think of the questions that you would ask her, these really serious questions, you know, but it's the questions that have to do with the things that touch your life on a regular basis.
How's the food? Food's huge.
Right, which everybody asks that, but never would I have asked about paper products.
No, they ask about the food, they ask about the activities, do you have bingo? They ask about, you know, where do you go? But other questions that they don't ask is medical doctor appointments.
Okay.
Do I have to get there on my own, or do you provide a van or a day that you go?
And is there a cost associated with it? Right. No, I mean that's, and that is, again, that might not be an everyday thing, but it is a more common occurrence. So, you know, and I think a lot of assumptions are made, and that's why I love the idea that you're really pointing out that communication and really breaking it down to this very specific questions. And you know, you might not need to ask about the paper products for one client, but for another one you would, because the kids might have, or the person might have told you how particular they are about certain things. So you really get to know the person and what makes them tick and what their likes and dislikes are, and that must help guide you with some of the questions.
Right. I mean, what do you like to do? What did you do? Most importantly, what did you do for a living?
Yep.
You know, it's amazing. You know some of these stories too. The people that you meet and the stories they have and the things they used to do. It's incredible. Yeah, and
it's nice for people to value and to, you know, to really help that person still keep identifying with that, you know, and because that's that's who they are. It's not who they were, and that's what a lot of people like to say. It's who they are. Right.
Some of the communities are really attuned to that, because I'll go into a community and we'll see old pictures in the hallways of the different factories that used to be in that town or a couple towns over, because there's a ton of folks that used to work there.
That's right.
At any of these bigger old mill buildings or industrial buildings.
Or I love places, you know, being from a family where my husband's a veteran and my uncle, my father, my grandfathers, I mean, a whole bunch of people. I love going in and seeing, you know, the wall of the veterans.
Right, yeah.
I mean, what a great way for people to break the ice, especially moving into a place where they're new. So give me one more, these questions are awesome. I'm never going to forget the paper products one, by the way. But, you know, what's another question that's kind of out of the ordinary that really helps you fine-tune where they should go?
Not so much a question as more of an observation.
Okay, I'll take that.
What I like to look for, and I'll tell the families before we walk in. So what you want to do is take a good sniff. Make sure there's no odd smells.
Yeah.
Take a look at the staff. Are they smiling? Are they happy?
Absolutely.
And then talk to the residents.
Yes.
Take a look at the residents. Are they smiling and happy, or are they sitting in a corner? And talk to them.
Absolutely.
Talk to the
don't get me wrong. Some people are always complainers.
Of course.
You always have that. But you can kind of weed them out. But I think that your service with assisting living locators is just what our population needs. So thank you so much for coming in and for sharing these tidbits. I learned so much. So thank you, Jon.
Jen, thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.